Hi guys, welcome to video number 5 where we are looking at the functions available in the ivotools library, and the one that we're looking at in this video is called frange, and F stands for float. So frange extends Python's range function, which you will be very familiar with already guys, but includes the ability to work with both integer and float values. So you can iterate using integers or floats using frange, so your start, stop and step values can either be integers or they can be float definitions. You can also create a list from a range of either integers or decimal numbers. None of those features guys are readily available using Python's standard range function. All will become clearer guys when we start to look at some of the demos in PyCharm, and then you'll get a sense of the flexibility and the usefulness of frange. So with all that in mind guys, let's crack on and do some Python demos. So guys, before we dive in and look at frange, let's go back to basics and just look at the Python range function. Okay, so a very simple example guys of iteration using Python's range. You've seen this a lot over the course of your Python experience. Is we can say for count in range, and as you know guys, I can specify the start, stop and the steps value if I wish. So let's say guys, let's hard code these in. Let's say that I want to start at 0, I want to go up to but not including 11, and I want to do that in steps of 1 guys. Okay, so you know from experience guys that actually I can take out the 0 and 1, but for the purposes of this demo I'm going to put in all 3 parameters guys. Okay, and if I simply print count, okay, you know what we're going to get. Right, so let's run that and see what we get. Okay, so there we have guys a very simple iteration from 0 to 10 inclusive. Okay guys, so if I wanted for example to use iteration to populate a list of values, well that's quite simple because I can simply declare a list here. So let's say my list, okay, equals a data structure of type list. Okay, and then what I can do is I can append count to my list. So my list dot append. Okay, and then I want the value of count, and then after the iteration has finished, so let's put in the end of iteration. Okay, I can simply print all of the contents of my list guys. All right, and no surprises, we will end up with a list with those sequential numbers as the content of our list guys. Okay, so that's an ideal way of being able to iterate and populate a list with sequential numbers, and of course we can vary the start and the stop and also the step position as well. So to give you an example of that, I could start at position 2, I could go up to but not including 16 in steps of 2. Okay, and I will get something very similar guys, but obviously the list has been defined by virtue of these parameters. So it starts at 2, goes up to 14, and the reason it stops at 14 guys is because we are iterating in steps of 2. So we have basically 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 and 14, all something guys that you will be familiar with. Now the problem is that that's all great, but what happens if I wanted to iterate and populate a list with floats? So let's try that. Let's start at position 0.5. Okay, so I want my first value to be 0.5. Okay, I want to go up to 16.5 and I want to iterate in steps of 0.5 guys. Okay, so let's run that and see what happens. Okay, and you can see guys, we get an error, and it says here quite clearly the float object cannot be interpreted as an integer. And what that's actually saying is that the Python range function is always restricted to integers. Now this has always been something of a frustration for Python programmers. You can write the code to cater for that, which is obviously what I've done here guys, because I've provided an alternative, but it's not ideal really, particularly if you want to collate data into a collection like a list. To cater for this guys, you can see at the top here that I have imported frange from ivotools, and all I'm going to do guys is I'm just going to put an F on the front, okay, for frange, and then let's run the code. Okay, and now you can see guys, all right, that I have a list that's been populated, okay, with floats. Now obviously there needs to be some tidying up here, guys, okay, because you will know from experience that Python doesn't always round up. It will simply continue to provide to the number of decimal places, guys, it's capable of, but it won't naturally round up for you. So you can always write in some extra code, guys, to round up those numbers if you wish. But the point, guys, is that we can actually specify using frange float values. So let's try another one, guys. Let's start at position 1, so I can mix and match integers and floats, guys. So actually let's start at position 0. Let's go up to 16.5 in steps of 1. excuse me, guys. Let's do it in steps of 0.5 actually. Okay, so 0.5. Okay, and let's see what that generates for us. Okay, so this one looks a little bit more reasonable in terms of our output, guys. So we don't have to do much tweaking here, but you can see that we get the list that we've requested. Okay, we've asked to start at 0. We want to go all the way up to 16, guys, and I can't show you that on the output screen because it's too large as it stands, but it says 16 at the end, guys, and we've gone up in steps of 0.5. Okay, so frange, guys, is really useful and quite powerful for enabling you to mix and match integers and floats to get exactly the type of iteration you want. And if you are working with that data, for example, you might be doing some maths like generating values of y for x if you're working with an equation, or simply to populate a list with float values, guys, then you can use frange as you see fit. And in fact, it doesn't stop there, because what we can do, rather than iterating to populate a list, we can simply do this, guys. Okay, we can say my list equals, and then we can use frange directly to populate the list. Okay, so I'm going to do frange. All right, my start value in my list is 0. I want to go up to 10. Okay, and I want values increments of 0.5, guys, so 0.5. Okay, and then I just print my list. Okay, guys, and those 2 lines of code, guys, okay, will give you a list which you simply won't get using the standard Python range feature, guys. Okay, so in many respects, if you've seen the video or you have used the video for round col function, or you've tried that out yourself, guys, it's very similar. It produces a list of either integers or floats, but in this case, guys, rather than generating our list from random numbers, we simply want to be able to generate a list of sequential numbers, and we want the liberty to be able to do that with either float values or integers, guys. Okay. Now, of course, the other thing we can do, guys, as you can see here at the top, it defaults to list. You can actually type in dtype equals tuple. Okay, if for any particular reason you want to go anywhere near tuples, guys, you can do that as well if you fancy playing. And just as an aside, if I take all of these values out, guys, and put no parameters in at all, okay, it basically defaults to the standard type of list, guys, that we very often just simply generate in order to do a basic Python program, okay, where we just generate a list, or we iterate from 0 to 10. So that's a very popular range, just to provide us with simple iteration. And just taking out all of the parameters, guys, will simply generate a list from 0 to 10 inclusive, which is also quite useful as well. Okay, guys, so that's the end of the demo. I think we've covered off everything that frange will provide. Have a go, guys, because all you need to do is to import it and just put an F on the front of Python's range, and you have a lot more flexibility to be able to work with both integers and float values. So I hope that's all been useful for you guys. I will see you in the next video.